What's going on, everybody out there? It's Ron Brown, LMT, the People's Fitness Professional, aka Soul Brother number one, reporting for duty. Uh, just like I was saying on the last one, I got to get used to saying this. Like, comment, share, subscribe, super chat, man. NYP Talk Show is actually a media company that we are striving to build right now. We're striving to build. It's the media company, and the podcast is just the platform we're using to grow the media company. All right, just to let y'all know, because we noticed that we don't have enough representation of these, like the 5% Nation, Moors, and all these different groups. We don't have enough representation and positive influence. So we decided to create this platform along with a whole media company to balance things out there. So support us, super chat. What else is out there? Super chat. That's all I know. Super chat. Oh yeah, and Cash App, NYP Talk Show, Cash App, NYP Talk Show, Cash App. B Knowledge is back in the building. Peace, God.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming
Peace,
up.
peace, peace.
How you
Yeah, no
be?
problem. Oh, all is well, man. All is well. Continuing to elevate, as we should.
Indeed, indeed. So we're talking about today's podcast is about 5% nationalism, 5% nationalism. So I want you to explain that.
Okay. Well, we left off last time, kind of getting headway into nationalism and
Mhm,
my origin in that world. So
mhm,
first I got to say how we became a nation. So as a 5%, Allah, his comrades, they were in Temple number 7, where Malcolm X was the minister. And basically, right before Malcolm X left, Allah left, and he, knowing his lessons, uh, knew who the 5%, 10%, and 85% was. And running with this idea and teaching that the black man is God, and teaching that there is no mystery God, and teaching what? Civilization, teaching young brothers, right? How to go from boys to men to gods. That was essentially the reality of that day and time. And we're talking about 1963, when some of the first that either are firstborn or introduced the firstborn to the knowledge when they came around. So when 63, headwaying into 64, when things started to heat up, and going with this notion of being a 5%er, a 5%er, a 5%er, according to those lessons he knew, right? Living that out, the majority of the population, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches. So if you're not familiar with the lessons, right? These are questions and answers from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his teacher. So these lessons helped, right, Allah, the founder, the father of our nation, the 5%, to have further realization of himself, right? And further investigation into himself. And when he found that, just like the lessons were saying, he was Allah, just like the original man is Allah and God, like the lessons teach, and so on and so on. He started to bring this out into his community and teach. To make a long story short, on where the notion of 5%er comes from, because these lessons teach the 85% are the masses that are uncivilized people, right? They don't know their origin in this world. They believe in a mysterious God, right? They just are easily led in the wrong direction, and so they're led by the 10%, which brings us up to 95% of the population. So it's basically saying that a minority rules the majority, like in politics, like in religion and dogma, and so on and so on. And this minority in particular that Elijah Muhammad was speaking about was the minority that leads the masses to believe that the Almighty true and living God is a spook and cannot be seen by the physical eye. Now, this minority blood sucks the poor and what the rest of the masses, rich or poor, into believing that there's a power outside of themselves so that they easily give authority outside of themselves. Psychological warfare, right? So The 10% controls the 85%, not just in religion, but in all facets of life. People are generally easily led in the wrong direction through just how humanity has been trained for a while. Left is the 5%, as the lessons teach, that they are the ones who know who the true and living God is and who teach who the true and living God is, right? We're the ones that teach civilization, right, to our brothers and sisters in the masses, right, to bring them into a fold of righteousness. This is how this story or the origin in this world began. Allah is teaching this. He's teaching the meaning of civilization. One having knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, and refinement is not a savage in the pursuit of happiness, right? He's teaching the duty of the civilized person that knows that. He's teaching that there is no mystery God, that, right, the Son of Man, right, humanity, prophets, messengers, so on and so on, have searched for and interpreted for, and so on and so on, for this mystery God for trillions of years. However, none of these men actually what led anybody to God. So he said, you got to look at the man in the what? The mirror. So the man in the mirror became what? The one who's responsible for the world we're in. We say all the above is caused by the Son of Man. Essentially, us as the black man, right? The conditions we're in are a result in some type of way of our ways and actions, right? Fast forward 5%, 10%, 85%. Allah is teaching us. Him and his comrades is teaching this. The brothers who he first started teaching are teaching this. Now, we're becoming a nation for a couple reasons. One thing we can get clear, anyone who has this teachings knows about the firstborn, or I'll stick to the firstborn in Mecca now. The firstborn, contrary to popular belief, is not someone who first got the knowledge, or is not someone who was one of Allah's first students or first fruit or anything like that. Those were designations, those were ranks and positions, those were seats of authority that were mandated to particular brothers that was qualified to teach.
All right. Can you
So,
explain that?
right, okay. So usually people would think, you heard of the firstborn. Everyone gets introduced to Messiah, Asalam, firstborn prince, Yahora, so on and so on.
Hmm.
However, it's usually thought that these are Allah's first students. These are the first ones that got the knowledge, hence the firstborn, right? Because born in supreme mathematics is nine. So they have this thing where they say that the firstborn are Allah's first nine students.
Hold on.
Now,
Thank you, Joey. Thank you, Joey. Peace to you. Really appreciate you.
peace. Now, the firstborn are really those who are born in a mental state and a way of thinking that was being manifested. Because you know how in the church, right? They say you born again when
Mm.
you come into Jesus Christ, right? So if we dealing with what they call nowadays Christ consciousness, right? If we're dealing with what Jesus being just us and us being the Son of Man, because the law was teaching that we the new God, we the what black baby Jesus that they don't know about. We're the ones where what we have to bring them to an understanding of what we're talking about because what we have is not what been revealed in this type of way. The actual reality that there is no mystery God. So the firstborn, people usually think that means the first nine Allah taught, when that just really means certain brothers who got that position and qualification from him. It's more of a title, a
Okay.
position and rank.
Don't
The
mean to cut.
firstborn.
Right. Don't mean to cut you. So are you saying that Allah structured it based on like captain and lieutenant?
That's exactly what I'm saying. He just didn't call it that. He said, you know what? You're my firstborn. Basically, that's how it went. So the firstborn are the ones that what were the first really qualified to go what do they think? Because like for instance, like God Supreme, he got it before some of them, and he ain't no firstborn. He came through one of them and had even a closer relationship with the law than some of them. However, I'm saying that to clarify one, what that is. They were the qualified teachers. Those are the ones that Allah said, you go here, you do this. And they was the firstborn of his what? Mindset and what he was doing. Also saying that to segue into our building into a nation. Because when you're starting to do things like this, you go from just a movement or a teaching or just what's going on in the street to starting to organize your people into a nation. Now, what he was teaching at the time was yes, y'all my 5%. However, I'm now building y'all into my nation. This is what he's teaching God's supreme and other brothers. Because going into investigation of lessons, because everything is real, he would teach on Yakub to get them understanding of nation building. So if Yakub used the black, brown, and yellow of his time
Mm-hmm.
to build a nation, Allah said, okay, I'm going to use the black, brown, and yellow of my time to build my nation. So he said the black, brown, and yellow that Yakub used in that day to graft the nation of his own, I'm going to use instead of what separating the seeds like he did, the black from the brown, brown from the yellow, so on. I'm going to unite the seeds by taking the seeds and the nations within nations of black, brown, and yellow, right? And that's the what the Constitution, right? The buildup of what I'm doing in today's day and time. That's what was just naturally, organically going on. It didn't just start like, oh, I'm coming to make a separate nation or da da da, anything like that. He was just being him. He was building, teaching, and he came into okay, now we're building a what nation? So a nation, right? And that also goes into like born because nation, right? The root to that is the same as like natal, like what you're born into, like nativity.
Right.
It's also right the same as nature. And if you look at the etymology of the word nature, it talks about something you're born into. It talks about innate things, something you already have, right? So our nature became our nation because us living out who we was, us having our firstborn, right, presenting to us the nature of the original man, which is God, us living out that divinity, that nature became our nation. So I could go on for that to forever. However, the teachings of who the 5% was, that sped up into what? Allah realized, okay, I got something going here. There's hundreds and thousands of these guys and these women out here. So this is something that's organically building into a nation. Look at all these black, brown, yellow brothers and sisters coming into the knowledge of themselves in the time of the 60s through many different facets. And they all started gravitating towards him. The nation was becoming what? The nation. He was teaching that they were a nation within a nation. That's another concept I want to bring up. Because what I'm doing is showing that we are supposed to be headed into independence and governance of ourselves. And whenever that conversation gets brought up, it is put in the same realm of being anti-government or anti-white or something like that. And what I'm here to say is that being anti-American or anti-government is not a prerequisite for sovereignty. Again, being anti-government, being anti-American, being anti-white is not a prerequisite before the original people on this land to be who they are. And being a nation within a nation, which is a teaching that a lot of brothers repeat, Allah would say, if they would look at the climate, the political climate of that time, they would know that a nation within a nation is a political term because the nations of the world that of that time that were freeing themselves from the authority of imperial Britain, imperial France, right, imperial Spain, imperial Portugal, and so on and so on. These nations were now nations within nations. So the term nation within a nation is one to represent and mean a nation who was captured by another nation and now they have complete obedience or a semi authority under that nation or empire. And it also means like what happened with our people. Now, I say 5% of nationalism because one, it started with what grew naturally as black people, so called, right? Being a nation within a nation here in America. How did that happen? All the tribes of Africa, right? West Africa, Central West Africa, all on the coast. And to be fair, I'll say a lot of the tribes of original people from here, over a 400 or 500 year process, we melted right into the several nations that became Black people in America, right? Jamaicans in Jamaica, Haitians in Haiti. The difference is they have sovereignty, as in Haiti, semi sovereignty, as in Jamaica, or assimilation, as in Black people here in America. So I'm building this thing up so we understand the terminology in politics and where we're at as a people and how Black people, like I'm saying, became a nation within a nation. Because over time, we developed into a distinct ethnic group, what people call African American. When people say Black, nigga, whatever, all over the world, it's known exactly what nation you're talking about. Now, we're a nation within a nation, obviously. Because of the Inquisition, right, of the European states that got together, and also in the same way became what, a nation of nations. So all the tribes of Africa, right? Because we know we're Igbo, Yoruba, Mande, so on and so on. And then we got grandfathers and grandmothers say Cherokee and so on and so on. So we know that we're a culmination of all those original people. The white folks had the same thing going on, right? I'm still at black nationalism and white nationalism, clearing up nationalism, because they're a culmination of the Germans, the Spanish, the Italians, the British, and so on, that left that nation to build nation and fought those nations who their ancestry is from to build America. So these two separate nations, right, became one nation on this land. However, one dominated, leaving Black people a nation within a nation, a distinct culture, history, bloodline, genealogy, and so on, in a nation within a nation. Now, those hundreds of years of us transforming into this new man, the Black man in the wilderness of North America, right? What happened the latter 20th century, mid 20th century, the Black people coming into the knowledge of themselves started to now create nations within the Black nation. Now we come out and say, okay, we have the Hebrew nation, the Moorish nation, we have the 5% nation. Now, Black people went from a nation within a nation to even now, even under the authority of Imperial America, still building culturally and creating nations within the now Black nation. So, what I'm saying is, as 5%, and we introduce the 5% nationalism, what we need to do is, being the most intelligent thinkers on the planet Earth, right? We need to, with mental right maturity, with spiritual maturity should come a political maturity. So we need to come to the point where we theorize and we have think tanks on who, what, when, where 5% nationalism is. Because though I can be uh initiative the same way a Mao would be, or the same way a George Washington would be, and so on and so on. We still have to what, manifest our destiny, now becoming one of those nations within the Black nation, and do something for ourselves. Our goal was always supposed to be land, freedom, justice, equality for ourselves. But one day, as a 5%, we'd have to have land for ourselves. So now I think with all the high science we have, we should be able to come to a maturity of independence and territory. And like I said, that the prerequisite to that is not coming against anyone, it's just standing on your square and developing, not even developing because the plan is there, but moving forward with the power that we already have. And I don't know if you want to say something, because I was going to how we could do that.
Peace, you hear me?
Yeah, now I do.
Okay, okay. Now, I wanted to ask, being that you did say a law, um, said he said something about nationalism, a nation within a nation, right? He said that. So I want you to, expound on that, and what I noticed another move was, not him only working with Barry Garther and also Shamgar, Universal Shamgar with the flag. Like it started to look like he was moving in like a nationalism kind of, a way. So if you could kind of expound on other moves he made to
Right,
solidify your point.
right. So with the flag, that's a good point because anyone that looks at the history of the world, creating a flag is an act of emancipation. That's the act of, what I'm saying, separating and saying this is now the authority that I'm under. Like the Americans say, I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a flag, you're now saying this is my what banner. So that's one point. And one, we know he had a military background, decorated soldier. So he wasn't dumb or numb or naive to the idea of what we needed to do to succeed. Now, the common misconception is that he was totally assimilative. Now, there's assimilation and there's separation. Separation doesn't mean segregation. Separation means that I'm not being treated right. I have the right to one, do for self to avoid that mistreatment. And also, it's just a human right if you've held down a territory, a history, a culture, and so on and so on, that you naturally developed into a said nation. But about the nation within a nation, the flag was a point. His dealing with Barry and Mayor Lindsay and so on and so on was a point. Like you said, this was for those that don't know, this was the mayor at the time of New York City. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? His name was Mayor Lindsay, and he had a aide, the mayor's man, who was Barry Gotham,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Allah was teaching both of them at this time. And what he's talking about is that when Allah needed our flags, the buttons we wear on the lapel, right? If you ever seen like this in the thumbnail and so on and so on, the mayor of New York City had those printed for us and gave those to us to distribute for our nation. So now another point to how we can come into our political maturity is that the school we have was given right to us in 1967 when a law came home from Madawan and he was meeting with ABC X Y and Z. They asked him what he wanted, right? And he wanted a place to teach his 5%ers, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wanted to continue what he was doing without being up in everyone else's face. So the block that they was already teaching on, right, became what? The Urban League Street Academy initially, because the Urban League is the source, just like there's nonprofits and so on. And nowadays, that was teaching in there, getting brothers their GED, sending brothers to college with different programs and so on and so on. So initially, that school, which is now Law School of Mecca, was supposed to be like an alternative high school type shit. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what it was supposed to be. Then all those type of brothers back then was going there, especially the ones that was living in that area. So when you ask a nation within a nation, what are some of the other moves that makes me see that this idea was present is because us obtaining that property when a political authority gives you as a nation, as a tribe, as a people, a piece of real estate, that's an act of trade, that's an act of commerce, that's an act of good faith, that's the
Mm-hmm.
act of saying, listen, I recognize you because it was given to us, right? Basically, in a way of a land grant would be nowadays. However, it was given to us for those that don't know, 99 years was the lease. It was a 99-year lease that was given to us in 1967. So that was the initial plot of land that was designed so we can have a headquarters and we can grow out from that. It's in the center of world commerce, 125th in New York City. You
Mm-hmm.
can't beat a better world embassy. But a nation within a nation. This was always told to those that was there that we have to have something of our own. But what I'm saying is there's a misconception that that means that you're being like what people will call a black revolutionary. Not that I'm personally anti that idea, but there's a misconception that what people have see in the media as the bang bang shoot 'em up type of guy, just F the law, da, 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 that's how you have to move forward to for freedom, justice, and equality. Now, I'm not saying that violence isn't necessary, you know what I'm saying, in being able to stand ready to defend yourself.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not naive. However, there is a point in time where we're going to have to ascend to this political maturity, and one of the first steps is the food security. You know, and what I'm heading into, because food security and me now having experience as an apprentice on the farm, taking food from seed to harvest, and now starting college in agricultural business, like Ibrahim Traore, you know, food security. And there's a world example right there that I love to give people of how food security could be the foundation to sovereignty. Because if you don't need to look outside yourself to eat, that means your surplus you can export and circulate for business, and that also means that you have an abundance of food. And it also means that this is how banks are formed, because there needs to be a standard behind your currency. And that's, a whole nother build. But just like if there's a gold standard or not, or so on and so on, seeds, real estate, so on and so on, if back in the hands of the people, could be, what is supposed to back our exchange.
Okay. Now I want to go into this. So if you have any other thoughts, you have
Now, go ahead.
anything now? The whole NGE thing, right? Let's talk about that. So,
Okay.
from what I hear, from what I heard, Allah was on his deathbed, and he said, "We are no longer the 5%. We are no longer 5%ers. We are now the nation of gods and earths." Can you build on that?
I mean, to me, that sounds real mystical, right?
Right.
Like,
Like right
like
before he dies, right? That's so
that
convenient.
sound, yeah, 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 yeah. So what I'll say is, if we look at the latest public record we have, the Otisville tape, like I spoke about in the last interview,
Hmm.
October 1967, he says we're 5%. Okay. He died, he went home, right, in June of 69. So that's a very short time period, for him to make that move.
Hmm.
Now, if I have to look at this as a judge or a prosecutor or whatever, and how I would look at it is, we know when we took on first 5% of names. You know about that? We first took on 5% of names.
Yeah,
There was
they
a
were
time
Muslim
when
name.
Allah said no more Muslim
No more
names. Five
Muslim name.
percenters
Right.
don't have Muslim names.
Yeah.
So firstborn Shaheen from Medina, right? Knowledge God, right? Um, they went to see Allah at Madawan, June 25th, 1966. And the first thing he told them was about 5 percenters don't have Muslim names. Knowledge God name is Walik. You know, another example of us coming into our own nation. He's like, okay, we had the, what I'm saying, the Akbars and the Muhammads and the so on and so on. Now we gonna be powerful and Lord this and this that. That's how it's gonna be now. Those dictations were spread out, and those that were supposed to know. So to me, I don't know about the deathbed thing. If he was said that on his deathbed or near his death, and then there's no deathbed, because where's the deathbed? Because Allah was assassinated in an elevator in the middle of the night, June 13th, 69.
Right.
So I understand where people might exaggerate and get the deathbed.
Mhm.
However, they say towards the end, he was saying, "Oh, when I'm not here, you'll no longer be the 5%. You'll now be nation gods of earth." Okay, my thing is, from the past and what I see in his track record of making sure all the orders get out to everyone they're supposed to get to, just
Mhm.
like with the names, just like when we have the school, just like with handing out flags and so on and so on, just like with who was supposed to teach where, the firstborn. If he told everyone that, why wouldn't he tell everyone the name change? That don't make sense. And you gonna tell me Universal Sham God don't know our name change.
Right. That's a
Saheem don't know our name change. Black Messiah don't
right.
know our name change. You telling me that all these guys, come on. So with that, what I'll say is
That's true.
how God Supreme teach it, right? Because there's one point in what you said, and the other point was where people they say that Allah said that was a maturity step, that they was no longer the 5%, that they was now the gods and earths because they like not his followers no more. He's now the guy. He was saying this towards the end of his, physical life. So that's false because that's false because Allah was already calling them and they was already knowing they was gods before that. You know what I'm saying? When we had stuff like the minister's book, that's a whole nother history. And when we had certain things that was given out as rank and organization, when Allah changed and tweaked and reneged on some of these things, he was telling them it's because y'all gods. Y'all need to have ranks of authority over each other. Just all you need is rank and responsibilities, basically. So with the nation of gods and earths, it's more like, and that's what I said is basically how God Supreme break it down. But it's more of a description. I think personally that it got turned a description that Allah used to say, y'all are the gods and earths, y'all are the gods and earths, y'all gods and earths, right? Because in the tape, he even said, woman is the earth you plant in, just like this earth you build on.
Hmm.
He was calling them gods and earths. And I think that that turned into that rumor and they ran with it. That's how I think about it. And I'm speaking careful because I know Dumar personally. Knew Dumar, knew Allah B personally. You know what I'm saying? Um, I used to write for the Five Center. I don't know G. Khalid personally, but he publishes that paper. And this is the crew that teaches that. You know what I'm saying? That Allah told them they would now be X, Y, and Z. What I have to say about that in knowing one, I stay to what happened in my day and time in this, right? However, from the authority, the brothers above me that would know better, almost nobody agrees to that. I'm just being real. Out of all of them that was here ever, that was from the first, I almost none of them agrees to that. It's just that those 4 or 5 people that say when Allah was new, he just knew he was going. He was having these senses, he was going to die, and he started to tell us to change the name and
Hmm.
so I'll leave that at that. What I say is, if we're the 5% nation, right? As we are, because that's what we grew into. Because he was just, if we really be real, he was just saying 5%ers. If we really, really be real, he was saying 5%ers. Then it was developing into because y'all my 5%ers, y'all are now my nation. So that okay, 5% nation. And when the description came of, oh, we the 5%ers, the gods and earths, I think personally they ran with the nation of gods and earths when it's more the 5% nation of gods and earths is more a description of what the 5% is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's how gonna look
Five
at that.
percent nation of gods and earths.
Right, it's
Of
not that our name is the nation of gods and earths,
right.
you know, and even Universal Sham God, when before he returned, he was writing in the Son of Man, about so the idea again, you're asking about points on we're supposed to be moving towards nationalism. He was writing about um different councils should be made in every state and cipher, and that we should go towards an official name because this issue was back in the 80s. So what I'm saying is why I say 5% nationalism is because there's things that we have to do. Allah ain't walking around, justice ain't walking around. Them firstborn, most of them gone. So it's up to us to create the political theory. It's up to us to take everything that's out there on nationalism and what? Bring it into the best part, as we say. And then we can say, okay, with the foundation of land as the basis of freedom, and we know that quote unquote hate and so on isn't a prerequisite to your sovereignty, we should just as gods, it's just common sense. It's not even that deep to me, it's common sense that we should be trying to build our own. That's simply what 5% nationalism is to me.
Okay.
And it
Now, where
started.
now I'm sure you have some suggestions or ideas as to where we should build this. From we should maybe purchase land.
Right, that's a good question. So there are several methods of land acquisition, and my method of land acquisition that I would suggest could vary because it depends on what we're capable of. Before I go into the methodology of land acquisition, what I'll talk about is your question, where I would suggest and where my ideas would be. And I'm gonna go back to how we've been pushing for a while as far as black folks. Um, the Black Belt South, to me, is still the most consistent black farms. It still has the most consistent black ownership in counties. You know what I'm saying? It still has from the deep south. We know that's known to be black. But that idea spans back that nations of the world already recognize this as a place for black people to consider themselves because a nation within a nation, that term, right,
Hmm.
was actually um, recognized by Stalin. And Stalin, at that time of the communist world, the fascist world, and so on and so on, through the communists, black nationalists in America, recognized the Black Belt South as a nation within a nation. So on a worldwide level, um, black nationalists have already put out there that the reasons and the history, because other people don't know our history. Russia don't know our history. Tanzania doesn't necessarily know our history. Ghana don't know our history. They don't know. Most of us was in the South. We went up to New York and Chicago and LA and the Great Migration, and now a lot of us going back, and they don't know our ancestral travels. So the Black Belt South, one, because it still has the population, and two, because under force, we already built agricultural empire down there. So to
Mm.
me, if we do the work in the same place with our own hands and benefit from it ourselves, it could work much easier. Or it could work in our benefit, I'll say, as opposed to our demise. I think we could benefit from the agricultural South because it's already a renewal and a renaissance that is going on. So if we talk about the Black nation, so-called African Americans, where I would suggest we do that as a whole, the South, and where I would say the 5% nation as a nation within that nation, technically, we do it in the South. I'm in Charlotte. That's why I moved down here. That's why I'm training farming down here.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Any other uh uh advantages?
Of the South.
South, yeah.
I'll go the Gulf of Mexico, what they're trying to change to the Gulf of America, is one of the biggest economic hubs and ports in the world. So being in proximity to that would guarantee us export and import, you
Mm.
know. So as well as the Eastern Seaboard, right, which we know is Gullah territory,
Hmm.
and that leads me to the other historical reference of today's the 15th. There's something called a Special Field Order number 15. When the Civil War was over, Abraham Lincoln and General, I want to say it was Tacoma Sherman, something like that. They enacted Special Field Order number 15, where they went and asked black people in the South, the black leaders, the pastors, the nationalists, and so on and so on, what you want. Do you want to be a part of America, or do you want to separate into your own nation and build your own land? And we chose to build our own land and not become part of America. This is pre 13th, 14th Amendment. And Special Field Order number 15 was enacted, and black people all went to the Gullah Coast in masses because what Special Field Order number 15 was a land permission granted by the president and the general who won the last war in the South to give the coast of North Carolina, starting in southern North Carolina, all the way down to the tip of northern Florida, and 30 miles inward was to be an independent territory for the new freed black man. And it's my personal political opinion that President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated because of this. Because post his assassination, who was his vice president? Was it Jefferson? One of them. They came right in and took back Special Field Order Number 15, and that's what made us, instead of building an agricultural empire, that's what turned us into sharecroppers.
Mm.
And having the mistreatment and the sharecropping is what caused all our great grandparents to sell all that land and do like mine in the early 1900s to go up to New Jersey, go work in New York at the railroad. And my people is from Lynchburg, Virginia, real black folks. My folks is from Macon, Georgia on the other side, real black folks. So I understand the whole lineage thing. But yeah, that would be some of the other benefits, that port, and that's the history of Special Field Order Number 15. So if I was on a world stage, what I would ask or what I would put towards the world is that we already chose what we wanted to do pre 13th, 14th Amendment due to Special Field Order Number 15, and it was taken back.
Mm. Okay. All right. So now, as far as politically, how do you think the 5% should present itself to to the nation within inside
Mhm.
the nation? How would this? How should the nation present itself to the nation?
Right, good. Okay. So you have the American nation, right? Then you have what we'll say the black nation, right? African American, so called, and so on. So, what I think how we should present ourselves is one, how we already are as far as knowledge of self, how you come in, because that puts you in a cultural setting, right? So you can one identify with who we are, and our identity isn't just broad and misty. It's not, you know what I'm saying, to be mistaken for anything else. So I would one, like I've been doing, clarify who we are to the people. We should speak for ourselves. And once clarifying who we are, what I want 5%ers to know and what I want everyone else to know is that it is okay for us to want to speak as a part of the black community. A lot of us run from that, like we don't want to be a part of the black community, like we just something else.
Mm.
Like the 5% is a black nation. It was founded in Harlem when Harlem was the Atlanta, like
Right.
you come on. So this comes from our people. So I will present ourselves as one to clarify who we are and know that we are here for our people to have freedom, justice, equality. And we are also here with those in the conscious community, those within the black community that know, yes, we need to do what I would say a federation, a union, what you would call politically a united front. I think we can achieve that together, right? Like a plan, like a pan African Americanism, as if you will, that
Mm.
we can have a pan black man, as far as all together coming as something that accumulated here. And it's okay for you to say, this is my nation. I'm from the Moorish tribe. This is my nation. I'm from here. This is my nation. I'm from here. Just like everyone else do, and sit down and say, this is our federation. But I'm saying to everyone else and to 5%, it's okay for us to have a seat at the table. Like I said, it doesn't mean you anti-white, pro-black, whatever people want to argue about. Being against anyone is not a prerequisite for you to be for yourself, unless they're in your way. And we know that story.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the obvious.
So you're
As
saying,
the same with America. So that's how it would let black people know, yo, we're here. We want to build a nation. We're not just trying to tell you, oh, fuck your religion, fuck your God, da, 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 da. No, we're here to stand side by side for you and still reach for what? Happiness, just not in what? A savage way, or the pursuit of happiness is not as a savage. And I will come to America, like I said, presenting a special field order number 15, presenting all the different land grants that was given to the HBCUs like NCA&T, and so on and so on, that was supposed to help us build a community based off the expertise we already had. And it
okay.
was one
Mhm.
more thing that, and I would present to the United States and the world over, that all attempts at what they call rebellions, revolts, right? All attempts at post rebellion and revolt area of black political organization was subconsciously, it was actually an act of nation building. It was really us organically and subconsciously wanting to build a nation for ourselves. And it's been mistaken for, and it's been coerced to be assimilation. And that's my biggest problem. That everyone, you assume black nationalism is an assimilation to become equal in whatever society. When in reality, I think everyone should have their own choice. That's what I'll say. I would say to America, I would say to Black America that Black people, one, and 5%ers, the 5% nation, need to come to the political maturity to know pre immigration, because we have a lot of brothers from different nations, pre civil, and I'll say immigration with the when those states are in their current status, because there was always blacks going back and forth between the islands all these hundreds of years. That's a whole nother bill. But pre all of this, we had a decision to build a nation for ourselves, and that's okay to still want this. And you need to decide that if you want to be American, you're going to be American. It's not just going to be a black white thing. If you want true equality in this country, you need to come to a political maturity where you say there's no distinction of its peoples. Or the second decision, these four major decisions, what I would present to the world if they listen right now. That first one, that black people should take an evaluation of. The second decision would be, do you want to return to a modern day country of your ancestry? Which you know is the thing a lot of people do. My third point that I would bring that people should have political maturity to present or think about is, do you want to go to another country, maybe that's not your ancestry, that still accepts people? You can go to Canada, there's citizenship routes. Right now, I don't know if you know, even as massage therapists, they want so much more health care workers. They're expediting citizenship of massage therapists.
Where? Canada?
Yep, right now, it just happened like 2 years ago.
Wow.
And the fourth decision would be to make a black nation of your own right here. I don't think it's necessary to go all these other places.
Hmm. Okay. So 5% nation, at 5% nation, it's its own nation, right?
Yeah, yes. That's what
Presented
we've developed into, and we're still developing into.
right. Now, let's say we're presenting that to the American government. So we have our own nation, our own flag, our own plot of land, right?
Okay. Or we might not have the land yet.
Okay.
We could be because okay, so we were supposed to talk about land acquisition.
Right.
So there's you said purchase. Purchase is one idea, but excuse me, historically there's also treaty.
Hmm.
Historically, there's also gifts, right? Historically, there's the part we don't want to talk about, conquest. You know, there's several methods of land acquisition, whether it be conquest, whether it be treaty, whether it be a gift, whether it be a mutual agreement, whether it be an annex. You know what I'm saying, of land to or from another place. There's several methods. It's not just purchase. So any of those methods, like I said, land grant acts come with hundreds of acres, like the HBCUs. I would say, give us a land grant, give us 1,000 acres in Georgia, because I'm also, as far as me being an agriculturalist and worrying and having a thought about the world economy and not taking more than you need. We only need so much land. We don't need no millions of acres for us. We'll grow into what we have and need.
Okay. So the point I'm making is we have, let's say we have a land. We have,
Yep.
however we got it. We have land. We have our own flag. We're our own nation. Now, how are we presenting ourselves to the American government on a political front? Do we?
Well, to me, you're not going to be okay. This is what I say. We're already our own nation because we're a people, right? That's the Constitution nation. But what I'm talking about is the difference between a nation and a nation state, right? Between a nation and a nation state. A nation could be a nation within a nation, like we're talking about. But if they don't have any political sovereignty, they're just a nation. They're not a nation state. Mexicans have a nation state called Mexico, but there's Mexican people of the Mexican nation who live in America. They're a nation in a nation by that way. There are Jewish people who are citizens of Israel, and they are a nation within a nation by creating whole towns over here. However, they still have a nation state. They're not just a nation within a nation subject to someone else's political authority. So when it comes to how I will present myself to them, is that what we need to build as a black people is something provisional. It's what you call a provisional government. It's what you call is a government or an organized group, which it doesn't have to be government in the form people think. Just our parliament is our government. So our parliament should have the authority, right, to go to this government, like you're talking about. And how I will present myself to them is one, we have the history of the flag, we have the history of the school, that's already there. So we have a history of them being on our side towards independence.
Mhm.
And then what I would do is let them know we want to, or build on the idea of transitioning from a nation to a nation state. And that I don't think that because you have a plot of land that that's your nation. This
Mm.
has to be recognized by other people. So I
Right,
would ask them to recognize us the same way Morocco recognized them.
right.
That's what I would do. I would ask them to recognize us and show how we could benefit um, as partners, but you have to do that through creating national products, which is why I'm into agriculture. You
Agriculture.
have to do that by creating a worthy trade to these nations. Because historically, Special Field Order number 15, I would present that. Because even though we're the 5% nation, most of our lineage and history has to do with those black folks in the South.
Hmm. Okay. So
Yeah, it
now,
wouldn't be a whole complicated situation. I would bring back the what he had with Barry and Marilyn.
all right. To be a nation, people must accept their nationality, have a national seal, national constitution, and national a land and a national flag. Okay, that's peace.
Yeah, that's peace.
Now, another question. So now we're recognized.
Yeah.
Okay, how are we voting?
Okay. Now, like I said, and what I want to keep reiterating so people don't think I'm coming as an authoritarian over 5%ers and what I'm presenting to you, because that's the issue in the nation. People say, this is what we're doing. I'm going to go to the UN and represent us. And no, what I'm saying is we need to build a theoretical framework and an action plan for what we're doing politically. We got enough bright minds to do it. We just can't be scared or misled to present ourselves that that's not what we're doing. So, restate your question.
So what I said is, we have land. Oh yeah, how are we presenting ourselves in a political field? Are we voting?
Oh, the voting. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if we were independent, we would be independent of the American voting system. But our own voting system, you asking about?
Oh, you're saying we're totally independent, so we don't vote in
No.
America.
Well,
Like
to
we don't
me,
vote for the president.
independence means like independence. Like you
Okay.
vote for your own. I'm saying if I got 1,000, 5,000, 100 acres in Texas, in Florida, whatever, having billions of acres isn't a prerequisite to sovereignty. I'm
Mhm.
saying if you have enough land to be self sufficient and self productive, you can be a good trade partner to the world, no matter the scale.
Mm.
So I'm talking complete independence. Now, the
Understood.
only vote I think black people need to do in America, or what I would say, how should the 5% come as a voting block? If we were to vote, I think we should come as a block.
Right.
That, okay, there's 10,000 5%ers, 20,000 5%ers, primarily on the East Coast and spread out through so and so. We have pool and X, Y, and Z. We can, as a block, lobby, you know what I'm saying, and pull certain resources. But that's if out of those four options, if your goal is assimilation. I say that no one should tell no one what to do. As a 5% nation, it doesn't make you in different nations if a 5% citizen wants to stay in America and another one wants to build a 5% nation. That's why I gave the example of Mexico, because Mexico has a state, but there's proud Mexicans in America. Just because they're not under the political authority of Mexico doesn't mean that they're not still part of the Mexican people. So it's the same way that those 5%ers that want to fully assimilate and stay in America and be good citizens and all this shit guys be talking about,
Mhm.
they can do that. However, that doesn't negate that there should be room for minds within the nation to want a political destiny for ourselves.
Right. Indeed. 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 On that note, let's stop here. I would like to keep building on this. This was a
Mhm.
great build. Because what I wanted to talk about, how would you present, I guess how would you treaty? Because I always mention this a while back about how the 5% nation can treaty with Moors, do business with Moors, can do
But
business
we
with,
need that united front. That'll be a
yeah,
united front, a federation.
a
We should be
federation.
able to.
That's what you said
That's
earlier.
right. That's what we
Right.
should. And I'm presenting. We should. That's what I mean by what is the 5% as a nation going to present to the black community? It's time. You know, one of the guys, one of the older guys, born everlasting. Actually, he say, "Hey God, you know the black man's God is old news, my man. Everybody fucking know already. Look at the internet. All right, I'm 31. The 31st degree and the 136 asked what? Then what happened?
Then what
That's
happened?
what I'm here to show. Then what happened?
Right.
That's what I'm here to show. Right? Not how long or what it takes to do first to make devil. We know it takes to first start grafting from the original man.
Yeah.
However, what I'm here to do is what? Unite. And I'm not gonna rely on these older brothers bickering and arguing about the destiny of our nation. That's why I went and had 5 sons already. I'm only fucking 30. Because I know we need the manpower.
Right. Indeed. 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 So this united front,
Yeah.
we're gonna have this conversation. We're gonna have this
Th-
unite. We're gonna have this united front conversation. That's a great way to end it. So let's keep that in mind, everybody. United front. United front. Thank you, God. Peace to the God be
Great.
knowledge. I really
Thank,
appreciate you. Thank you
thank you.
to everyone in the chat. We have another podcast in about 3 minutes. See y'all in 3 minutes, and we are out of here.
Peace.
Peace.